This week in 1954, Jet magazine featured this woman in its Mr. and Mrs. section. She is a Mrs. who is pictured without her Mr. because she killed him. She was not a celebrity or a politician or anyone of significant historical importance. Just a plain old everyday civilian like you and me who got involved in some hot mess. Well, maybe not exactly like us. I'll read the story, then show you a few follow-up stories, and you can decide if she was like you. Let's get into it. But first, if you like these videos about the most scandalous people from yesteryear who make the hot mess history with Ty Said What Ty Said channel a time capsule for the culture, subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know every time that I upload one of these videos or every time that I live stream, and comment "I subscribed" in the comment section so that I can say hello to you. Now, on to why you are here. Today's story comes from this issue of Jet magazine, dated July 15th, 1954. The article is titled, "LA Wife on Trial for Killing Mate Over Blonde." And it reads, quote, Mrs. Genevieve Monroe, 32-year-old former Chicagoan, went on trial in Superior Court on a charge of brutally stabbing and bludgeoning to death her husband, James, 34-year-old aircraft plant engineer, April 2nd, in their fashionable Los Angeles apartment. The prosecution asserts that Mrs. Monroe murdered her husband in a quarrel over his association with statuesque blonde Rita Malcolm, a white typist in the same plant where he worked. Mrs. Monroe's attorney, Earl C. Brody, contends that the slaying was done in self-defense, saying Mrs. Monroe was the victim of numerous beatings at the hands of her husband. Mrs. Monroe told Jet, "I knew all about Rita. That's not why I killed him. The trial is expected to reveal sensational testimony." End quote. Well, you know that I had to do some more digging so that we could find out how the trial ended and hopefully even find out some of that sensational testimony. Further digging turned up 2 more Jet articles and several newspaper reports, mostly from the California Eagle, which was a Black-owned newspaper in Los Angeles. Here's the rest of what Jet had to say, as well as some details from the other newspaper articles. 2 weeks after their first story, in this July 29th issue, this follow-up story revealed that in Genevieve Monroe's signed confession, she said that she killed her husband James following his, quote, attempted act of sex perversion. It went on to say, quote, on the night of the slaying, her husband tormented her by using tweezers to pluck hairs from a sensitive part of her body, and when she screamed objections, he told her, "Other women can stand it, why can't you? This is my happiness, why can't you stand it?" Mrs. Monroe also reportedly told arresting officers he never enjoyed a sex intercourse normally. "He seemed to torture me sexually for happiness." End quote. What do you think the act was that her husband was trying to make her perform with him? I'm curious to know your answers. Let me see in the comment section. This April 8th edition of the California Eagle tells a lot of details. The body of James was discovered 30 to 36 hours after the killing. Genevieve was close friends with her landlord and his wife. They knew that James had a habit of leaving his wife at home alone while he would go on dates with the blonde woman or other women. So it was not a shock to them when Genevieve wanted to come over and spend some time with the wife, Mrs. Stewart. She spent the night on their sofa. Then in the early hours of the morning, Mrs. Stewart caught Mrs. Monroe trying to take her life by drinking a bottle of iodine. It was at that point that Genevieve Monroe confessed to killing her husband. Mr. Stewart went to check the apartment and discovered the body of James. Because James never kept his affair with the blonde typist a secret, police decided that her motive was jealousy. But Genevieve insisted that she killed James in self-defense. Quote, "I didn't kill him over that blonde. I killed him because he was beating me." End quote. Though she did confess that the blonde would often harass her. About that, she said, quote, "She gave me plenty of trouble, it's true. She'd come to our apartment for him. She'd call me and tell me she was out with Jimmy. She even told my landlord Jimmy was going to send me back to Chicago and she was going to move in with him. But that's not why I killed him. I had to protect myself." End quote. She said that the night before she killed her husband, the two of them had gone out to meet with a friend from their hometown of Chicago. They took a cab home, but James dropped her off and didn't come inside. He left and didn't get back home until after 2 a.m. He had to knock on their door to wake her up to let him inside because he had given his keys to their apartment to the blonde. Once inside, he tried to make love to Genevieve in what she described as an abnormal way, and when she resisted, he hit her and a fight ensued. And the blonde? That is Mrs. Rita Malcolm. She was married herself and a mother. When she showed up to the scene breaking down crying, that's when the police decided that jealousy was the motive, despite the scene at the apartment that clearly showed that there had been an intense struggle all over the apartment. We also learned from this article that the Monroes and Mrs. Malcolm all worked at Lockheed. The dead husband was an engineer there. This paper also revealed that Genevieve had filed for divorce months before the killing. She said that her husband drank heavily and smoked what she called the other kind of cigarettes. After she found evidence of that, he beat her. She said that he beat her nearly every weekend, so when she filed for divorce, she left him. But he found her. She went on to say that he had several girlfriends, all of them white, so Mrs. Malcolm was not any particular threat to her in that regard, even though Mrs. Malcolm seemed to think that she was something special. There was repeated mention of how luxurious and fashionable the couple's apartment was in all of the reports. This July 1st California Eagle article told readers that she would plead that the killing was done in self-defense. It also told a little more background info on the marriage. After Genevieve and James got married, she worked 2 years to put him through school so that he could be an engineer. She was a riveter at Lockheed, and when she got paid, if she didn't get James her check, he would beat her. Then this July 8th article shows just how much Rita was being treated like the wife instead of the other woman. Okay, so she loved him and he loved her. She testified about the many weekends that she spent with James from October of '53 until his death in '54. I'll just read one quick section from this article regarding Rita's testimony. Quote, "Mrs. Malcolm, wife and mother, also related the incidents of a bizarre foursome one evening at the Malomo. Present were her husband, Jack Malcolm, Mrs. Monroe, James Monroe, and herself. At one point she testified, James leaned across the table and said, 'I love you.' She answered, she said, 'I love you too.' Not long after, the two women went to the restroom. Mrs. Monroe reportedly asked, 'Now I know you're the one,' and then, 'Where have I failed my husband?' Mrs. Malcolm said, she replied, 'You have failed him sexually.' In cross-examination, defense attorney Earl C. Brody, fingering some 33 torrid love letters, asked the blonde witness what she meant by failing him sexually. She replied she had been told Mrs. Monroe was frigid. Mrs. Malcolm also told the court that she had loaned Monroe money during their courtship." End quote. I can't help but wonder why this guy who was an engineer would need to borrow money from a typist. But Rita's story kind of goes along with what Genevieve was saying about her husband taking her money. And there may have even been a connection to draw about the other kind of cigarettes that James had been smoking and his needing money from women all the time. Rita was definitely trying to put Genevieve away for good. And by the way, Genevieve was facing the death penalty, death by the gas chamber of San Quentin to be exact. So how did the story end for Mrs. Genevieve Monroe? Here's the last story from Jet magazine on the trial in an issue from August of 1954. California woman not guilty of killing mate over blonde. Mrs. Genevieve Monroe, 32-year-old Los Angeles wife who testified she killed her husband last April after he insisted she submit to a perverted sex act, was found not guilty of murder after less than 3 hours of deliberation by an all-white jury. Mrs. Monroe was charged with stabbing and beating to death her 32-year-old husband, James, in a quarrel involving attractive blonde Mrs. Rita Malcolm. Attractive. You knew that it was coming. Anyway, Mrs. Rita Malcolm, who admitted during the sensational trial that she and Monroe had been intimate on several occasions. So tell me, do you believe Mrs. Monroe's story? Do you believe the blonde? Do you think that Mrs. Monroe was jealous of the blonde? Do you think that the blonde was jealous of Mrs. Monroe? Let me know anything that you think about this story in the comment section. Duke Ellington's wife was never accused of killing him, but she might have been trying to when she slashed his face. Maybe it actually was over another woman. I published a video about that story that you can see here. I will also leave a link to it in the description box. My sources for this story are Jet Magazine Archives, 1954, and the California Eagle Archives, 1954. If you want text notifications so that you can get a text 15 minutes before I release a video or 15 minutes before I live stream, simply send a text to 786-632-2135 to let me know that you want text, and you will get an outgoing text message 15 minutes before I have a new video release. If you have a business, product, service, YouTube channel, or social media account that you would like to promote on my channel, email me at tiwan@tisaidwhattisaid.com to get rates for advertising on my community tab, my live streams, and or my edited videos, just like this one. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Ty Said What Ty Said channel. Please leave a thumbs up and comment so that we can get a discussion going. And share this video on all of your social media, especially your Facebook. That really helps me out a lot. And subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you can know when my next video is ready for you. And if you don't like what I'm saying, but you love it, feel free to hit that applaud button just below your video screen there and send me some
donations.
Yeah, baby. See you on the next video.